The hurricane had been screaming for hours, but the worst part wasn't the wind. It was the silence between each gust. Isla pressed her forehead to the rain-slick glass, heartbeat echoing in her ears. Every palm tree outside bowed low, as if begging for mercy. She should have been in the main resort with the others. Instead, she was stranded in the furthest bungalow on the property, 400 meters of flying debris and rising water between her and safety. "Brilliant, Isla," she muttered. Her mother's voice rang in her head. "You always find trouble, even on a deserted island." A sharp crack made her jump. Something had slammed against the roof. She reached for her emergency bag, ready to move toward the bedroom where the walls were solid, when she heard it. Footsteps, heavy, on the deck. Through the sheet of rain, a figure emerged, broad-shouldered, staggering, his left leg dragging like it barely obeyed him. Dark hair plastered to his face, expensive clothes torn and clinging to a body that looked like it had fought the ocean and almost lost. Their eyes met through the storm, grey, sharp, and full of something Isla couldn't name. Then his hand lifted toward her in a wordless plea. She hesitated. A stranger in the middle of a hurricane. Every instinct told her to keep the door locked. But if she didn't, he wouldn't make it another minute. Welcome to Stories That See You, where every story finds its voice. If you enjoy this kind of deep, emotional storytelling, please don't forget to rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps me grow and tells me which stories speak to you the most. Thank you. Isla's fingers hovered over the lock for a beat longer than she should have allowed. Outside, the wind roared, rattling the glass like it wanted in. He swayed where he stood, chest heaving, seawater streaming from his hair and down the sharp line of his jaw. She slid the door open. The storm punched into the room, salt, rain, and cold wrapping around her like a living thing. He stumbled forward, one hand braced on the wall, the other clutching his side, crimson spreading dark through the soaked fabric. The wind caught the door and slammed it shut with a bone-shaking thud. "You're hurt," she said before she could stop herself, her eyes fixed on the blood seeping between his fingers. He didn't answer right away, just looked her over in one slow, assessing sweep, like he might scan a coastline for danger. His breathing was ragged, each inhale shallow. "You're here alone." It wasn't a question. "I was doing safety checks when the storm hit. Couldn't make it back to the main building." She moved to the bathroom, snatching the nearest towel, cheap white cotton, suddenly feeling useless in her hands. "What happened to you?" "My yacht hit the reef, maybe 50 meters out. Engine died. Water came fast. I swam in before she went under." His tone was flat, but the way he lowered himself onto the nearest chair told the rest, every muscle taut, his movements careful. She passed him the towel. 50 meters in this weather? You're lucky you're not dead." His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Not my first close call." Another gust shook the bungalow, rain hammering the deck. She glanced toward the bedroom, where the shutters were latched tight. "We can't stay out here, it's too exposed." He didn't argue, just pushed himself to his feet with a faint grunt. As they moved down the short hall, Isla caught a better glimpse of him, sharp cheekbones, strong hands, and the tension in his jaw as he tried not to limp. Whoever he wasn't used to being vulnerable. The lights flickered once, then went out, the storm pressing in around them. "You need that shoulder looked at." "It's fine," he cut in. It wasn't. The deep gash on his left shoulder and the stiffness in his left leg told a different story. "We need to clean it before it gets worse. Then I'll need your help." The wind clawed at the walls. "We need to get away from the glass," he said. "The bedroom's more protected," she replied, leading the way. Inside, they shoved the dresser against the lone window. "I'm Isla," she said, flashlight catching his face. "Keaton." The room felt smaller with the storm's roar outside. He slid down the wall, a groan slipping out. The lamp's light showed the gash across his shoulder and the dark stains down his leg. "You're bleeding," she said, rummaging through her emergency bag. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." She was kneeling beside him before she realized she'd moved. "Take off your shirt." One brow lifted, a flicker of amusement in his storm-grey eyes. "Excuse me? So I can clean the wound, unless you want to bleed all over the furniture." He studied her for a moment, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. We're stuck here until the storm passes. I'm not letting you bleed out." The shirt slid from his shoulders, revealing golden skin marked with the thin scars. The fresh gash on his left shoulder was ragged and angry. "This is going to sting," she warned, pressing antiseptic to the wound. He didn't flinch, though she felt the heat of him under her hands. "Where'd you learn first aid?" "Resort training and YouTube," she said, wrapping the bandage. "Now let me see that leg." "It's fine. It's bleeding." With a resigned sigh, he rolled up his pant leg, showing a shallow cut on his calf. She cleaned and wrapped it quickly, aware of his eyes on her. "You've done this before," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "Once or twice. Guess I'm just good at keeping people in one piece." Their faces were inches apart now as she worked, her hands gentle but firm on his injured skin. The bedroom was wrapped in a fragile silence, broken only by the distant howl of wind above them. Something shifted between them, something dangerous, electric, and entirely separate from the storm raging outside. Isla pulled back quickly, her pulse drumming in her ears. "There, you'll live. Thanks to you." The way he said it, low, rough, almost intimate, sent an unexpected heat spiraling through her chest. This was insane. She was trapped in a hurricane with a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a dream, and yet her body was reacting as if they were characters in some fevered romance. A deafening crash came from the main living area, followed by the sharp tinkle of glass breaking. "There go the windows," Keaton said grimly. "We're not going anywhere until this passes." The wind roared against the walls, a constant, unrelenting force. In the flickering beam of the flashlight, Isla caught the set of his jaw, determined, unflinching, but beneath it she thought she saw something else. Weariness, maybe even fear, buried deep. "Do you think this place will hold?" she asked, her voice almost swallowed by the storm. He scanned the corners of the room, ignoring the pull in his injured shoulder. "It'll hold. The structure's solid enough, but we're not leaving until morning." He turned to her, and in that moment his gaze was steadier than the beam in her hand. "Have you ever been through something like this before?" "No, not really." Her lips quirked into a tense half-smile. "They sell you the romance of working on a tropical island, but they don't exactly put hurricanes in the brochure." A short laugh escaped him, dry, quick, but gone almost as soon as it came. "So, not romantic then? Unless you're on a billionaire's yacht with champagne." "No." She meant it as a joke, but as the words left her mouth, she realized how absurd it sounded given the man in front of her, wet, bloodied, and nothing like the polished image the word billionaire evoked. For a moment, there was only the rain. The storm was their whole world now. Keaton leaned back against the wall, tilting his head just enough to watch her. "Are you all right?" She frowned. "You're the one bleeding, but you're asking about me?" "Because—" He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "You look like you're afraid." Her breath caught, not because he was wrong, but because he'd seen it so clearly. Something about that unnerved her more than the storm. And in that moment, Keaton felt less like the untouchable stranger she'd met minutes ago, and more like someone she could almost trust. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "I've met people twice your age with half your nerve." A shaky laugh escaped her. "Compliments?" in the middle of a hurricane? He shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his shoulder. I'm just stating the truth. Isla masked her fear the way she had since childhood, by meeting it with defiance. I'm just being careful, she said. A sudden explosion outside made them flinch. It sounded like part of the main building's roof tearing away. Keaton tried to stand, but his injured leg betrayed him, forcing him to stumble. Isla caught his arm, her touch lingering a second too long. Another loud crack shook the bungalow. The small side window shattered, salt-heavy rain sweeping across the floor. The temperature dropped instantly. Isla grabbed a blanket and moved to the bed's corner. Keaton followed, a thin ribbon of blood still trailing from his shoulder. Checking the bandage, she frowned. I'm out of antiseptic. We can't leave it like this. Opening the minibar, she pulled out a bottle of whiskey. This is going to burn. Keaton tilted his head, a faint smirk on his lips. I'm a tough man. She rolled her eyes, soaking a strip of cloth before pressing it to his wound. His breath caught instantly. She soaked a strip of cloth and pressed it to his wound. His breath caught. Didn't expect it to be that rough, he muttered. Don't complain, she said, tying the makeshift dressing. Keaton reached out, took the whiskey bottle from her hand, and tipped it back for a long swallow. Then he smirked as he handed it to her. No sense in wasting it. Your turn. The whiskey burned down Isla's throat, warming her chest. For a moment, the rain eased. Isla glanced toward the window. Maybe we could make it to the resort. Keaton shook his head. I'm coming with you. No, you're injured. I'll just take a quick look and come right back. The moment she stepped outside, the wind cut across her face like a blade. She hadn't gone 20 steps before the sky rumbled again, and the rain returned with a vengeance, harder than before. By the time she stumbled back inside, her hair was plastered to her face, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Every piece of clothing clung to her skin, dripping. Keaton pushed himself up instantly. You're going to get sick if you stay like that. You need to warm up now. Take off those clothes and get under the hot water. The bathroom was enclosed in glass. From where the bed stood, the entire shower was in view. Isla paused at the doorway, turning to him. You're not going to look this way, she said, her tone caught between shy and daring. Isla slowly pulled down the zipper of her soaked jacket, peeling the wet fabric from her skin before dropping the rest of her clothes aside. The first touch of hot water made her shiver, steam quickly filling the bathroom. I'm not looking, Keaton said from behind her, his voice carrying a trace of mockery. The fogged glass blurred her figure, but not enough to hide the curves of her silhouette. You're not looking, right? She asked, the faintest tremor in her voice. Of course not, he replied, smoothly. But when her outline emerged in the steam, his eyes betrayed him, drawn, uninvited, to the shape of her body. His chest tightened, and he took another long drink of whiskey, as if the burn might distract him from the heat building inside. Keaton tried to keep his eyes fixed elsewhere, fingers curling around the neck of the bottle as he took a slow sip of whiskey. But when the faint blur of her curve appeared through the misted glass, his throat loosened involuntarily. He looked. Just for a second, maybe longer. Then he turned away, almost irritated with himself, but the image had already burned itself into his mind. The sound of the shower, mixed with the howl of the storm. But there was another kind of noise now, an unspoken hum between them, impossible to ignore. Through the small, broken side window, the wind sliced into the room with renewed force. Outside, the palm trees leaned almost to breaking. Keaton stood at the window for a moment, testing the scene. It was still suicide to go out there. His leg throbbed with a deep, dull ache, but at least they had shelter. For now. When he turned back toward the bed, he froze for a beat. Isla was standing at the head of it, wrapped in the resort's smallest robe, damp hair falling loose over her shoulders. Her arms were folded in front of her, as if holding in what warmth she could. "Get under the blanket," he said, voice low. "You're still freezing. I'll find you something that helps." He rummaged through the minibar, pulling out every chocolate bar and snack he could find. Then his eyes landed on a chilled bottle of champagne. He hesitated for only a second before thinking, if not now, when? He set a few packs of chocolate in front of her. "How's your shoulder?" she asked softly. "Your leg might even be fractured. You shouldn't be on it so much." "I'll manage," Keaton said with a faint grin. "My body's tougher than it looks." A loud pop made her jump. "Wait, did you just open that?" she asked, glancing at the champagne. "Absolutely," he replied without shame. "We need fuel to keep warm, don't we?" "Not letting these bottles sit here while we freeze to death." Her head tilted, a teasing spark in her eyes. "We could drown if the bungalow floods, or get dragged out to sea. But freezing to death in here? I think you might be overreacting for champagne." "Not overreacting at all," he said, pouring the bubbly into a lone wine glass he'd salvaged. Handing it to her with a wry smile, he added, "Apologies, madame." The champagne flute seemed to have shattered in the wind. Minutes later, they were both beneath the thick blanket, sharing chocolate and slowly working through the bottle. The storm still raged beyond the walls, but in here the air felt warmer, not just from the champagne, but from the closeness, from the way every glance lingered a fraction longer than it should. Their voices began to drown out the chaos outside. "What's the closest you've ever been to danger?" Isla asked, popping the last half of a chocolate square into her mouth. Keaton leaned back slightly, his gaze distant. "Once I took a boat out, dove into the water, and then I saw it, a massive shadow moving toward me, great white." Isla's eyes widened. "You're kidding." "I wish." Its tail brushed against my leg. Cold, rough. In that moment I thought my heart was going to explode. She shivered and laughed at the same time. "Okay, yours is a little extreme." "What about you?" he asked, tilting his head. "Mine's way less exciting, but I still carry the mark." She drained the last sip of champagne from her glass before continuing. "Once, I fell off a motorcycle, one of those little ones. Hit the rocks, ended up with 26 stitches and a minor surgery. That's about as dangerous as I've gotten." Keaton murmured. "Interesting. Never had stitches myself. Now I'm curious. Can I see it?" Isla hesitated for a second, then slowly extended her leg from beneath the short robe, revealing a thin, pale line just above her knee. "And they didn't even stitch it cosmetically," she said with a shrug. "But it's my permanent reminder never to ride a motorcycle again." Keaton leaned in, fingertips tracing the line from her calf up to just above her knee. Her skin was warm under his touch, sending a slow wave through her. "I think," he said quietly, "this scar is actually kind of impressive. Maybe even sexy." Isla clapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a laugh so the whiskey in her throat wouldn't spill. "Sexy? I'm so self-conscious about it, I hate wearing shorts." "If it were mine," Keaton said with a crooked grin, "I'd show it off every chance I got. Makes you look adventurous, dangerous, unpredictable." She giggled. "I'm not exactly dangerous or unpredictable." His fingers brushed the scar again, slower this time, his voice turning warm and teasing. "This mark begs to differ, Isla. It tells a different story. The mix of alcohol, windy and cold air, and the heat of his touch closed the gap between them. When Keaton finally lifted his eyes to meet hers, there was no hiding it. His gaze said exactly what he was thinking. Isla's breath caught. The trail his fingers left on her leg made her stomach tighten in ways she hadn't felt in a long time. Keaton's fingers lingered on the scar along Isla's leg, the silence between them heavier than the storm's howl outside. Her breathing had gone uneven. Between the champagne and the heat of his touch, the rush flooding her body was impossible to deny. "I think I should check the door again," she murmured, his hand still warm against her calf. She started to rise, but his grip tightened, holding her in place. "You're not going anywhere, Isla," he said firmly. From the window, you can see it's pitch black out there, trees bending sideways, and the only thing more irritating than that view right now is the wind whistling through the glass. You'll just get cold. Stay here. Biting her lip, Isla sank back into the pillows. Fine, she said softly, her eyes locking with his, eyes that belonged to the most impossibly handsome, intoxicating man she'd ever been this close to. Keaton didn't look away. A slow, knowing smile curved his mouth. Think this place has a deck of cards? Monopoly? Backgammon? Something to pass the time? Isla let out a light laugh. In these luxury bungalows? No. Guests don't sit around playing games, Keaton. They usually entertain themselves outside. His smirk deepened. All right, then. How do you suggest we pass the time? I mean, there's a chance we could be dead in an hour, right? She rolled her eyes. You're trying to scare me. We're not going to die. We just have to make it to morning. Stay warm, stay put, and don't blow away. Keaton chuckled and nodded. Fair enough, in that case. Tell me about you, Isla. You got a boyfriend? She turned her head toward him, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. No. Is that really your topic of choice right now? I can't help it, he said, grinning with mock innocence. We're stuck in this room, in this bed, under the same blanket. And I happen to have a very attractive half-dressed young woman next to me. Asking seems pretty natural. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You actually think I'm attractive? More than you know, he said without hesitation, tipping back the last of his champagne before refilling his glass, and hers. Isla tugged the blanket a little tighter around her shoulders. Well then, thank you for the compliment. Let's talk about you, Isla said, tilting her head. Did you come here alone? No one else on the yacht? I like traveling solo, Keaton replied. I pilot my own boat, but my deckhand went to the resort to pick up some equipment. He's probably stuck there now. We didn't expect the storm to hit this early. We thought we had a few more hours. What about you? She asked, her eyes narrowing playfully. No girlfriend? Most people come to places like this with someone they love. Keaton's gaze lingered on her, a slow, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. So, you were curious after all? Isla rolled her eyes. Not at the moment, he admitted with a smirk. Outside, the rain intensified, slamming against the glass. The wind howled through the fractured window, creating a cold tunnel of air that rushed through the room. Overhead, the roof groaned, each creak louder than the last. Isla shrank further under the blanket, her voice trembling. That thing you said earlier, about the bungalow being swept out to sea, you were joking, right? Keaton didn't answer right away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. Come here. Don't be afraid. It was a joke. Nothing's going to happen to us. We just need to keep each other warm and make it through the night. In the dim light, with the storm raging outside, they lay together. Isla's back pressed lightly against his chest, Keaton's arms holding her from behind. His body heat seeped into her, grounding her in a way she didn't expect. Keaton, she whispered, not even sure what she wanted to say. Yeah, Isla? I just wondered if you'd fallen asleep. He moved slightly closer, his breath warm against the nape of her neck. Of course I'm not asleep, I'm keeping you safe. They both let out a quiet laugh, the sound oddly intimate in the dark. Isla bit her lip. She had never been with anyone before, had never had this much physical closeness with a man. The way Keaton's body curled protectively around hers sent tight little flutters through her stomach, making her heartbeat quicken. Isla found herself leaning the smallest fraction toward him, a reflex, not even sure why she did it, hips shifting ever so slightly in his direction. But Keaton, he was experienced enough to understand exactly what that movement meant. Then she felt it, his fingers on her knee, tracing the scar she'd shown him earlier. A rush of heat shot through Isla, uncoiling low in her belly as his touch lingered. "What are you doing?" she asked, breath hitching in surprise. Keaton's voice was low, rough drawl laced with heat. "This scar," he murmured teasingly. "I haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw it. I just wanted to feel it again." Her breathing grew quicker, heart thudding faster. Keaton leaned in, his lips brushing the side of her neck in a slow, warm kiss that sent a shiver racing down her spine. "And now," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Trying to keep you warm, Isla," he replied in a husky tone. When his fingers slid beneath the edge of her robe, moving over the soft curve of her chest, her breath caught completely. Isla's eyes fluttered shut, and a quiet sound escaped her lips. A sound she'd never made before, one the wind outside seemed to carry. That small, involuntary noise made Keaton's touch grow more deliberate, more certain. Isla was overwhelmed by an intensity she had never experienced, her body betraying her. With every quickened breath, she couldn't stop him, and she didn't want to. Slowly, she turned toward him. Keaton found her mouth, his kiss starting soft, then deepening, growing hotter, more urgent. In the next heartbeat, she realized her robe was gone, and she was beneath him, those storm-grey eyes and that strong, scarred body towering over her despite the wounds he carried. "This is madness," she breathed, but her gaze was locked on his lips. "Maybe," Keaton said, cupping her face with his free hand, "but right now it's just us. Out there, the world's falling apart. In here," she asked. "In here, there's only this moment." "I've never," Isla began, her voice shaky. "I know," Keaton whispered, his gaze steady on hers. "It's in the way you look at me, like you're trusting me with something no one else has touched." "Isla, we can stop. Just stay like this, hold each other," he whispered. But Isla shook her head, her voice rough with want. "No, I don't want you to stop." He breathed, his lips brushing her lips. "I swear I'll take care of every part of you." His hands moved with care, patient and certain, every touch remembering that this was her first time. "You're beautiful," he said softly, his breath warm o'er her ear, voice low and unsteady. "You've got me dizzy, stealing my breath, and hell, you smell like trouble I can't walk away from." She couldn't speak, couldn't find words. Every nerve in her body seemed to answer to him now. With his mouth on hers, she felt the warmth bloom deep inside, her body arching instinctively into him. The storm outside battered the bungalow, but inside, beneath the blanket, there was only heat. Only them. Outside, the storm still roared, but inside, their breathing began to slow. The frantic urgency between them gave way to a quiet, almost fragile stillness. Keaton's arm stayed draped around her, his hand idly tracing slow circles against her bare shoulder. "Tomorrow," he murmured, voice low and rough. "I'll remember this." Every second of it. Isla tilted her head just enough to look at him. The dim emergency light painted his face in soft shadows, his storm-grey eyes fixed on hers. "Even if the world outside falls apart?" she asked. "Especially then," he said with a faint smile. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her thoughts were a tangle of disbelief and warmth, the raw sensation of what had just happened still humming through her veins. She had never let anyone this close before, and yet with him it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable. Keaton shifted just enough to pull the blanket higher around them, tucking her in against his chest. Outside, a sharp gust rattled what was left of the bungalow, but in his arms, Isla felt an unfamiliar certainty, like no matter how hard the storm hit, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Within minutes, her eyelids grew heavy, the sound of his heartbeat lulling her towards sleep. Morning light brushed against Isla's eyelids, coaxing them open. Warm, golden rays spilled into the room, chasing away every trace of the storm. Outside, the ocean glittered, as if nothing had happened, as if the night before had been nothing but a fever dream. Her body ached faintly, a reminder of exhaustion, but deep inside there was a lingering warmth, one that made her lips curl into a small, sleepy smile. She reached out instinctively, fingers searching for the man who had been beside her just hours ago. Her hand met nothing but cool sheets. Isla's eyes flew open. "Keaton," she whispered, hesitant to break the fragile morning quiet. Silence. She sat up, the uneasy thump of her heartbeat quickening. Maybe he was in the bathroom. "Keaton!" she called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Pushing off the blanket, she slipped into her robe, her fingers trembling, though she told herself it was just from the cool morning air. She crossed to the bathroom, empty. The main living area, empty. A cold knot tightened in her chest. She moved toward the wide glass doors, the sunlight almost blinding after the long storm-dark night. The beach stretched before her, flawless and empty. The storm had passed, the sea was calm, and Keaton was gone. "Of course," she muttered with a sharp, humorless laugh. "Why am I even surprised?" This was how men like him operated, taking what they wanted, leaving before the consequences set in. The man who, only hours earlier, had made her feel safe here, with the storm raging like the end of the world outside. The man who had touched her, like she mattered, was now just an absence in the morning light. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed hard, refusing to let the sting in her eyes turn into tears. She wasn't going to give him, or anyone, that satisfaction. Grabbing the scattered blanket from the bed, she folded it with quick, sharp movements, as if tidying the room could erase the night before. She packed her bag without looking around. Last night had been a dream. Within minutes, her eyelids grew heavy, the sound of his heartbeat lulling her towards sleep. Morning light brushed against Isla's eyelids, coaxing them open. Warm, golden rays spilled into the room, chasing away every trace of the storm. Outside, the ocean glittered, as if nothing had happened, as if the night before had been nothing but a fever dream. Her body ached faintly, a reminder of exhaustion, but deep inside there was a lingering warmth, one that made her lips curl into a small, sleepy smile. She reached out instinctively, fingers searching for the man who had been beside her just hours ago. Her hand met nothing but cool sheets. Isla's eyes flew open. "Keaton," she whispered, hesitant to break the fragile morning quiet. Silence. She sat up, the uneasy thump of her heartbeat quickening. Maybe he was in the bathroom. "Keaton!" she called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Pushing off the blanket, she slipped into her robe, her fingers trembling, though she told herself it was just from the cool morning air. She crossed to the bathroom, empty. The main living area, empty. A cold knot tightened in her chest. She moved toward the wide glass doors, the sunlight almost blinding after the long storm-dark night. The beach stretched before her, flawless and empty. The storm had passed, the sea was calm, and Keaton was gone. "Of course," she muttered with a sharp, humorless laugh. "Why am I even surprised?" This was how men like him operated, taking what they wanted, leaving before the consequences set in. The man who, only hours earlier, had made her feel safe here, with the storm raging like the end of the world outside. The man who had touched her, like she mattered, was now just an absence in the morning light. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed hard, refusing to let the sting in her eyes turn into tears. She wasn't going to give him, or anyone that satisfaction. Grabbing the scattered blanket from the bed, she folded it with quick, sharp movements, as if tidying the room could erase the night before. She packed her bag without looking around. Last night had been a dream, a dangerous, beautiful dream she could never afford to keep. Meanwhile, on the far side of the island, Keaton stood among the shattered remains of his boat. The hull was split open, the motor a useless, twisted mess. Seeing it like this was infuriating and sobering. If last night had gone even slightly differently, he might not have made it to shore at all. He'd slipped out of the bungalow at first light, careful not to wake Isla as she slept beside him. She'd been sprawled on her side, hair tumbled across the pillow, her breathing soft and even. He'd almost stayed, but he needed to check the damage, get a read on their situation, and he admitted to himself he wanted to come back and see her again in that bed. Pulling his phone from his pocket, he was surprised to find a signal. The battery was low, but it would hold. He dialed. "Mr. Lawrence, we've been worried. After the storm, I'm fine, Tim. The boat's gone, but I'm fine. Took a hit to my leg and a cut on my shoulder." He smirked faintly. "But the dressing was done well. Still, bring the right supplies." "Yes, sir. I'll have a helicopter to the resort by late morning." "Anything else?" Keaton hesitated, glancing back toward where the bungalow would be. "We might be two," he said finally. "I have a guest. Be ready for that." By the time he started the walk back, the sun had climbed higher, warming the sand. The memory of last night flickered in his mind. Her touch, her laughter, the way she'd looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. It made the corners of his mouth lift without him realizing. But when he opened the bungalow door, the smile died instantly. The room was empty. "Isla," he called, his voice echoing off the walls. He checked the balcony, the bedroom, nothing. Her pack was gone. He just stood there for a moment in the middle of the room, staring at the space where she'd been. Keaton headed toward the main resort. The island had been partially evacuated. Only a handful of people lingered, gathering what they could salvage. He stopped a few of them, described Isla, but each shook their head. No one recognized her. He cursed himself. He didn't even know her last name. All he knew was that she lived in Florida. She was 22, and she'd taken a seasonal job here at the resort. It wasn't much to go on. When the helicopter arrived, Keaton stood on the dock, the blades chopping the air overhead. "Hold it here for a while," he told the pilot. He scanned the path from the bungalows, half expecting, half hoping she would appear. An hour passed. She didn't. Finally, he climbed aboard. As the helicopter rose, they swept over the storm-battered island. From above, he could make out the small bungalow on the far side, the one where the night had felt like something more than just survival. Keaton exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on it until it disappeared from sight. Isla was younger than anyone he'd let himself care about in years, different from the women who usually moved in his orbit. Beautiful, yes, but with a kind of unspoiled honesty that was rare. She'd trusted him last night, let herself be vulnerable with him. So why had she walked away without a word? He didn't know if he'd ever see her again. But as the island shrank behind them and the open sea stretched ahead, Keaton made himself a silent promise. When he got back to Tampa, he was going to find her, and this time he wasn't letting her disappear. Keaton's footsteps echoed down the stark white hospital corridor, the same measured steps for 3 days straight. But today they felt heavier, like each one carried the weight of something he wasn't ready to face. When he reached the door to the ICU, he stopped. Through the glass, he saw him. Richard Lawrence, the man who had built Lawrence Tech Industries into an empire, who had filled every room with his presence, now looked impossibly small beneath the tangle of tubes and monitors. His skin was pale, his chest rising and falling with the help of a machine. "Son," Richard rasped as Keaton stepped into the room. Even speaking seemed to cost him. Keaton pulled the chair close, forcing himself to sit tall, to be the unshakable son his father had always expected. "The company," Richard whispered, eyes locking onto his. "Are you ready?" Lawrence Tech. A multi-billion-dollar legacy. Keaton had been preparing for this moment his entire adult life, for the boardrooms, for the battles, for the weight of it all, but not for this, not for saying goodbye. "I'm ready, Dad," he said, his voice steady even as something in his chest cracked. Richard's thin, trembling hand reached for his. It was cold, shockingly cold. "Raymond will guide you, but you're stronger than I ever was. You always have been." Keaton's fingers closed around his father's, holding on like he could anchor him here. Just days ago, it had been another world, a storm, an island, Isla. Now that night felt like a lifetime ago. "Don't talk like that," Keaton murmured. "You're going to get better. We have time." But Richard only smiled. That knowing, quiet smile of a man who'd made peace with the truth. "No, son, my time's up, but yours is just beginning." The beeping of the monitor slowed, each tone stretching a little longer until there was nothing but the steady hiss of oxygen. That night, Richard Lawrence was gone, and Keaton Lawrence, 38 years old, with a billion-dollar empire resting on his shoulders, was left standing at the summit, utterly alone. 3 weeks later, Keaton stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass of his new office, Tampa's skyline stretching endlessly before him. His father had stared at this same view for years. How many mornings had Richard Lawrence stood here, weighing the city in his gaze, making decisions that would shape empires? What had he been thinking all those times? On the desk behind him lay a slim folder, the private investigator's report. He hadn't opened it yet. He didn't need to. The phone call days earlier had told him everything. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lawrence," the investigator had said. "During the storm, all seasonal employee records at the resort were damaged by flooding. The entire computer system's gone. You told me all you have is a first name, Isla." Keaton had closed his eyes at that, letting the silence stretch before answering. "I never got her last name. That morning, we were going to talk about everything, but with just a first name, sir, it's impossible. There are thousands of women named Isla in Florida, without knowing her city or age." "I know," Keaton had said quietly, the weight in his voice heavier than he meant to let on. "End the search." Now, the folder was in his hand, still sealed. He knew there was nothing inside but blank pages, and a closed door on something he wasn't ready to let go of. A soft knock at the door pulled him back. His assistant, Megan, stepped in. "Mr. Lawrence, the Mexico City project called. They say your presence there is essential. When do you plan to leave?" Keaton slid the folder into the desk drawer, as if locking away the thought itself. Maybe distance was what he needed. Life went on, and his life these past 3 weeks had become something entirely different from the one he'd known before. "Next week," he said. "It'll be a long-term project." "How long exactly?" "At least a year, Megan. I'll be rebuilding the operation from the ground up. My Uncle Reynolds and my mother will hold things here. I'll come back now and then. But for the next year, my life's going to be in Mexico City." He turned back to the window, watching the sunlight glint off the glass towers. In the reflection, his own face looked like a man already halfway gone. To another city, another life, carrying the shadow of a woman he wasn't sure he'd ever see again. That same morning in Sarasota, Isla sat crouched on the cold tile of the bathroom floor, waiting for the cramps in her stomach to pass. It was the third morning in a row, the third time she'd woken up and run straight here, hands gripping the edge of the sink, as her body betrayed her. When she finally dared to look in the mirror, the reflection staring back made her stomach twist for a different reason. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Just stress," she told herself. It's just stress, she whispered aloud, but even her own voice didn't sound convinced. Mija? Her mother's voice came from just outside the door, laced with concern. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. Isla turned on the faucet, splashing cool water on her face, willing herself to look normal. But when she stood, the room tilted for a second, forcing her to steady herself. She opened the door and found Maria Martinez staring at her with that look only a mother can give, the kind that sees straight through you. You need to see a doctor, Maria said, firm enough to leave no room for argument. It's just the new job stress, Isla insisted. Working in guest relations at the hotel. Isla. Her mother's tone sharpened. I'm a woman too. I know these signs. Isla froze, reading the truth in her mother's eyes, that knowing look. A cold knot formed in her chest. What are you saying? She asked, but her voice had lost its strength. That man, Maria said quietly. The one from the island. The world seemed to go still. Isla sank into one of the kitchen chairs, as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. 3 weeks ago, when she'd come back from the island, she had told her mother everything. The hurricane, Keaton, the closeness, the way he'd made her feel, and how she'd woken to find him gone. I trusted him, she'd said then, disbelief still fresh in her voice. I really trusted him, Mom. Maria's answer then was the same as now, soft but edged with warning. These rich boys, Mija, they take, they enjoy, and then they leave. Now Isla's hands drifted to her stomach, still flat. But maybe, I need to take a test, she whispered. Maria moved closer, resting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. You are strong, Isla. You know your father left me when I was pregnant with you, but I still made it. I raised you on my own. And you... She paused, squeezing Isla's shoulder gently. You can do this too. We can do this together, Mija. The next day, Isla stood in the tiny bathroom, staring down at the pregnancy test box in her trembling hands. 2 lines, just 2 thin pink lines, so small, yet enough to change her life forever. When she finally walked back into the house, her mother was already waiting at the door. She didn't need to say a word. Maria could read everything on her daughter's face. Positive, Isla whispered, her voice barely there. Maria pulled her into a fierce hug, holding her as if she could shield her from the entire world. Everything will be all right. You're not alone. Isla broke then, tears spilling against her mother's shoulder. Fear, anger, disbelief. They all tangled together inside her chest. Should I try to find him? She asked in a broken voice. Keaton. But how? I don't even know his last name. Maria eased back, looking her straight in the eye. Why? So, the man who left you alone in that bungalow can suddenly decide to take responsibility. But maybe what? Maybe he'll say he's sorry? That he only left because he went to check the boat? Maria's voice sharpened, though her hands stayed gentle on Isla's arms. Mija, men like that, they run from responsibility. You don't need that. Isla swallowed hard. Her mother was right. Keaton could have chosen to be there that morning. He could have woken her, explained, stayed, but he didn't. You're right, Isla said at last, her voice steadier. I don't need him. I can stand on my own. But that night, lying in bed in the quiet of her small room, her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach, and she thought of him. The steel-grey eyes, the way his touch had been both careful and consuming. That night, in the middle of the storm, she knew she might never see Keaton again. But a part of him, one she would love more than anything for the rest of her life, was already with her. Keaton stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Mexico City high-rise, the sprawling city stretching endlessly beneath a golden afternoon sun. His assistant's voice drifted in from the doorway, sounding almost far away. Mr. Lawrence, we need to set your return time to Tampa for the board meeting in Sarasota 2 days from now. The company's expecting you to be there in person. Tampa. After nearly 2 years in Mexico City, Keaton was finally preparing to return home for good. In that time, he had expanded the company into new markets, closed high-profile projects, and steered Lawrence Tech into record growth. He had become exactly the kind of leader his father had always wanted him to be: focused, strategic, and unstoppable. But he was no longer the man who once disappeared on spontaneous sailing adventures, chasing storms and fleeting pleasures. That man, the one who kept his world small and his emotions guarded, had been replaced by someone sharper, more deliberate. 6 months ago, during one of his occasional trips back to Tampa, his mother and the Bronson family, longtime business partners, had suggested a merger of a different kind. It had started as a business conversation, but quickly turned personal. The Bronsons' daughter, Stacy, was 32, poised, intelligent, and beautiful in a polished, understated way. Their engagement had been announced not long after. Stacy was sweet, and Keaton genuinely liked her. They were good friends, and their marriage would unite two powerful families and industries far beyond their existing ventures. To his mother, Eleanor, Stacy was the perfect daughter-in-law, graceful, capable, and without scandal. Keaton had decided it was time to build a stable life, to create a family. He no longer believed in the need for some consuming, reckless passion. With Stacy, he could have a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. It made sense, it was logical, and logic was safer. If someone had come to him with this idea a few years earlier, he would have laughed, maybe even walked out of the room. But now, he saw it differently. He turned back to the Mexico City skyline one last time, letting the hum of the city fade into memory before heading to his apartment to pack. The next chapter of his life was calling, one he thought he could control completely. 2 days later, Isla sat in the glass-walled office of the Guest Relations Department, scanning the week's reservation list. Sarasota's most prestigious hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, had been her home base for over a year now. After her time working at the resort, it was the best job she'd managed to land. Steady hours, decent pay, enough to keep Emma cared for, with a little left over. Isla, Jennifer, her co-worker, came practically sprinting toward her desk. She had that wide-eyed, gossip-hungry look Isla knew all too well. "Have you seen the VIP reservation list? Like, really seen it? Today, actual billionaires are coming here." Without looking up from her screen, Isla replied flatly, "Jennifer, billionaires come here every week. It's not exactly new." "Yeah, but this is different." Jennifer practically collapsed into the chair beside her, clutching her phone like it contained state secrets. "You haven't checked the list, have you? Keaton Lawrence, CEO of Lawrence Tech Industries. I read about him in Forbes last month. 40 years old, single, billionaire. And look at him." She spun her phone around so Isla could see. "Those shoulders, those eyes. Tell me he's not ridiculously handsome." Isla's heart gave a violent, traitorous jolt. Keaton Lawrence. The name rang in her head like a struck bell. Too loud, too clear. No, it couldn't be. It was just a coincidence. She forced herself to glance at Jennifer's phone. A man in a perfectly tailored navy suit sat behind a sleek CEO's desk, his hands resting casually on the armrests of an expensive leather chair. Steel grey eyes, steady and self-assured, looked straight into the camera, paired with that faint, knowing half-smile. The same mouth, the same eyes. Isla turned her head away too quickly, hoping Jennifer didn't see the blood draining from her face. She fought to steady her breathing, but her pulse was hammering in her ears. "When is he arriving?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even and failing. "This afternoon. They're holding the Lawrence Group's annual meeting here this year. 3 whole days." Isla's hands moved on their own, typing Keaton Lawrence into her browser. The first image that appeared made the room feel smaller, the air heavier. It was him. 2 years hadn't erased the man from the island, the man from the storm, from that night. But they had reshaped him. The tousled hair she remembered was now immaculately combed, every detail sharp, deliberate. The playful charm in his gaze had been tempered into something cooler, more guarded. The same steel grey eyes, the same strong jawline, the same mouth that had once pressed softly, then fiercely against hers. But he wasn't the same man. Not anymore. Isla, are you okay? You're pale. I need the restroom. Her voice barely worked. She stood, legs trembling, and walked fast, too fast, out of the office. She gripped the porcelain sink, splashing cold water on her face until her breathing slowed. Then she looked up at her reflection. 24 now. Motherhood had matured her, reshaped her in ways even she hadn't noticed. But under the steadiness, under the calm, was still the girl from the island who had once let herself believe a stranger's arms could be safe. Did she need him? No. She had Emma. She had her job. She had her life. Keaton Lawrence belonged to another world now, a world of boardrooms, tailored suits, and distance. He was no longer the man who had held her through a hurricane. She couldn't let him see her. They couldn't meet again. That afternoon, Isla sat at the lobby desk, pretending to focus on the guest ledger while her eyes kept darting to the entrance. Every time a sleek black luxury car rolled up to the front, her pulse jumped, only to crash again when someone else stepped out. "Isla, VIP arrival," the front desk clerk called out. "Mr. Lawrence is here. He needs a personal welcome." Her stomach knotted. I'm with another guest. Can you—" Too late. The glass doors swung open, and there he was. Keaton Lawrence walked in with the kind of presence that made the room rearrange itself around him. Charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, a folded pocket square peeking from his jacket. His posture was effortless yet commanding. Each step measured expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. Two assistants trailed behind him, but no one in the lobby was looking at them. Isla froze. Her breath hitched. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk as if it could hold her together. Then it happened. Across the ebb and flow of lobby traffic, his gaze found hers. Even from a distance, the steel grey eyes locked on her like they were the only thing in the room worth seeing. Time stopped. His stride slowed, his brows lifted, eyes widening, confusion first, then disbelief, and finally recognition. That look, the same look from the storm, from the firelit shadows of the bungalow. Isla's chest tightened. Panic flooded her veins. Without thinking, she snatched up her bag and turned away. "Isla!" His voice cut through the air, deep, authoritative, but trembling underneath. She didn't stop. Couldn't. Her heels clicked urgently against the floor as she darted for the staff hallway, the world narrowing to the elevator at the far end. She hit the call button, turned. Across the lobby, Keaton stood still, his gaze locked on her, his face carved with shock, and something else, something raw. The elevator doors slid closed, and the last thing she saw was his expression as the metal shut him out. 20 minutes later, Isla sat hunched in the staff lounge, back pressed against the cool wall, knees drawn up. Her chest rose and fell too quickly, every breath shallow, like the air in the room had thinned. "Isla, breathe!" Jennifer knelt in front of her, pressing a cold glass of water into her trembling hands. Isla blinked, trying to focus. "I'm fine. I don't know. My head hurts." "Your head hurts?" Jennifer's tone was skeptical, but her eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement Isla couldn't even fake right now. "Girl, did you see him? Forget the photos. Those pictures don't do him justice. In person, he's... Wow. Those eyes. That walk. Oh my God. And he said your name. Your name." She leaned in conspiratorially. "You never told me you knew him." Isla almost laughed, a short, bitter sound that caught in her throat. If Jennifer knew the truth, if she knew that Keaton Lawrence hadn't just said her name, but had once whispered it against her skin under the roar of a storm. Jennifer kept going, oblivious. "Anyway, Mr. Lawrence asked for you, at the front desk. Said, and I quote, 'Miss Isla from Guest Relations.'" She arched her brows. "So, Miss Isla, how exactly do you know the ridiculously rich, impossibly gorgeous CEO of Lawrence Tech?" I don't, Isla said too quickly. Her voice cracked. I mean, maybe we crossed paths at another hotel. But the lie tasted sour. She could still see him, standing in the lobby, the world falling away around him, his grey eyes locked on hers, with that flash of recognition she'd once dreamed of and dreaded in equal measure. Her fingers tightened around the water glass. No, she couldn't run forever. He'd found her, and this time she knew there'd be no avoiding him. Isla's shift had ended over an hour ago, but she still hadn't left the hotel. She knew Keaton was looking for her, had known it since Jennifer's breathless visit to the staff room, but she couldn't bring herself to step into his path. The meeting was inevitable. She'd told herself that over and over, but her thoughts were a tangle she couldn't unknot, her pulse jittery and unsteady. Inside the small glass-walled office beside reception, she paced in tight circles, palms damp, eyes fixed on the patterned carpet as if the answer might be woven into it. "There you are," the voice came from behind her, deep, steady, and so achingly familiar it pulled her back 2 years in an instant. She turned. Keaton stood in the doorway. The suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a crisp white shirt with the top button open. It should have made him look more casual, more reachable. But the quiet power in his eyes, the effortless confidence in the way he filled the space, that hadn't changed. Keaton. Her lips shaped his name like it was foreign, strange on her tongue after so long. She hadn't spoken it out loud in years. "Isla," he said, and the way he said it landed somewhere between a greeting and a memory. 2 years. 2 years, she echoed softly. For a moment neither spoke. The lobby was alive around them, suitcases rolling, phones ringing, voices blending, but it all felt distant, muted. "Dinner?" Keaton asked. "We have things to talk about." She shook her head. "No, we don't have anything to talk about." His head tilted back slightly, a flash of disbelief in his expression. "Isla, I'm just asking you to have dinner with me. About that night." "That night is in the past." Her voice was sharper than she intended. "You went your way, I went mine." Keaton took a step closer, close enough that she caught the faintest trace of his cologne. Warm, clean, unsettling in its familiarity. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to read what lay beneath her words. "I looked for you. I tried to find you." "Did you really?" Her gaze flared with heat, and not the kind that came from attraction. "When I came back to the bungalow that morning, you were gone, and when I woke up, you were gone," Isla cut in, a tense smile on her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I waited. 45 minutes. Then I realized we weren't even going to say goodbye, and I left the island. It's not important. It's over, Mr. Lawrence. Is there anything I can do for you regarding your stay? Because my shift's over, and I need to leave." Something flickered across his face. Frustration, maybe hurt. He dragged both hands back through his hair, exhaling slowly before stepping fully into the glass room. There was barely a meter between them now. "I hired a private investigator, Isla," he said, voice lower, more deliberate. "I was ready to search every corner of Florida for you. And now, after all this time, here you are. I'm just as surprised as you are. But I want to talk. Why are you shutting me out?" Her throat tightened. She could feel the sting in her eyes and forced herself to look away, swallowing hard to keep the tears where they belonged. "What could we possibly talk about?" she said quietly. "I work here. You're one of the most prestigious clients this hotel has ever had, a billionaire apparently, and in case you've forgotten, hotel staff aren't supposed to have dinner with guests. It's not ethical." He didn't move, but his grey eyes stayed locked on her face, cataloguing every flicker of emotion. She bit her lip, the air in the small room suddenly too thick to breathe. His gaze was warm, in a way that burned, the same warmth she'd felt that night. Keaton's mouth curved faintly. You know, I have a scar now. From that night. But because you patched me up so well, you can only see it if you look closely. Or touch it. God, why is he doing this to me? Isla thought, gripping her own arms. How long could she keep from unraveling? He glanced at his watch. 3 hours from now, 8 o'clock. I'm picking you up from your place. I have a meeting to finish first. There's a restaurant here I know you'll love. Forget about the ethics. No one will say a word to you. And Isla, his voice softened, almost unguarded, give me your phone number. I'm not making the same mistake twice. I didn't even know your last name before. After a while, I started to wonder if you were even real. His smile this time was genuine, eyes lit from within. She hesitated, knowing she was cornered. You don't need to pick me up, she murmured. I'll meet you there. He nodded slowly, as if weighing her answer. Fine. But if you stand me up, I'll be at your door every day until you open it. I'll come, she whispered. I'll be waiting, he said. And with one last look, a look that felt like it peeled back every defense she'd built, he turned and walked out, his confident stride carrying him through the lobby and out the hotel doors. Only then did Isla realize she'd been holding her breath. She let it out in a rush, palms pressed to her cheeks. Oh, God. She had a date with the father of her child. Isla stood in front of her wardrobe, staring at the rows of clothes without really seeing them. Her mother had called it just a friendly dinner, but to Isla it felt dangerously close to something else, a chance for revenge. Keaton had left her in that room. Not a word, not a note, not even a goodbye. For years, she'd carried that night like a raw wound, replaying it until the edges blurred, and for years she'd believed she hadn't meant enough to him to deserve a farewell. But it hadn't been just a night for her, not just a way to pass the time during a storm. She hadn't even known him well, but something, her instincts, her bones, had told her she could trust him. Maybe I'm more angry at my instincts than at him, she muttered aloud, surprising herself. Great. Now I'm talking to myself. Her mind drifted back to what he'd said earlier. I hired a detective to find you. She dropped onto the bed, her pulse heavy in her ears. Had he really meant it? All this time, she'd been so sure he'd chosen to walk away. But maybe he hadn't. Maybe he had wanted to find her, and all he'd had was her first name. Had she been too harsh with him? Her gaze fell on Emma, sitting cross-legged at the foot of the bed, making her doll jump in clumsy little arcs. Dark hair from her mother, pale skin and grey eyes from her father, the kind of grey that caught the light like steel and smoke. The most beautiful little girl in the world. And Keaton. Keaton had missed all of this. He'd missed her, not because she'd denied him, though she had, but because she had assumed he'd abandoned her. She'd never even given him the choice to know. The thoughts pressed in on her temples until her head ached. She rubbed her eyes, then froze. From the wardrobe, a hanger slipped free, dropping a dress onto the carpet with a soft whoomp. Isla glanced down. A red dress. She leaned forward, picking it up by the straps, holding it against her. Was the universe sending her a message? Just then, Maria walked in, eyes widening as she took in the sight. "Oh, mija," she said, shaking her head in delighted approval. "You've found your dress. Tonight you're going to knock him senseless and then leave him standing there. No one walks away from a Martinez woman. We give them their lesson, and we are the ones who walk away." "Like you did with Dad?" Isla said, lips pressing into a thin line. "You've always told me he left you when you were pregnant, but as far back as I can remember, he was always there. On my first day of school, at my graduation, on my birthdays, he was in love with you until the day he died. Why didn't you take him back?" Maria's smile dimmed, but only slightly. Because that man cheated on me while I was carrying you, and leaving him made me priceless in his eyes. We didn't live under the same roof, no, but... She gave a wicked little laugh. We flirted for years. Isla's heart ached as she studied her mother. But, Mom, I've always wanted a real family, a husband, children, a happy home, trust, loyalty, love. I'm not built for these games. And yet, here I am. My daughter's father doesn't even know she exists. We're strangers, and we have a child together. How am I supposed to navigate this? Maria's face softened. She sat on the bed, pulling Isla into a warm embrace. Everything will work out, beautiful girl. Hard times are gifts. They make us strong, make us wise, teach us what happiness really is. And you... She brushed a tear from Isla's cheek. You are the greatest prize a man could ever win. Don't forget that. Then her eyes sharpened. But tonight, don't make it easy for him. Let him prove he deserves you, and your daughter. Maria smiled again, mischievous now. Now go. Be a goddess. Never forget, Mija, the world is in the hands of women. For a few seconds, they simply stared at each other. The air between them stretched tight. Isla looked away first, breaking the silence. So, did you ever get another boat? After the storm? No, Keaton said, shaking his head. After that night, a lot of things changed. He leaned back, voice lower. When I got back, my father had passed. The company landed in my lap overnight. I had to move to Mexico City to expand operations. He hesitated, then asked, And you? What did you do? Isla's throat tightened. I came back here, picked up my life where I left off. Keaton studied her, his expression unreadable. These last 2 years, they've changed you. You seem older somehow, grounded. You're 25 now, right? He ran a hand across his forehead, exhaling slowly. That night, in that place. I didn't think about it at the time, but you were so young, Isla. And I was so much older. And She cut him off before he could finish. If what you're trying to say is that I wanted it too, then yes, I did. Keaton held her gaze for a long moment before a slow, almost hesitant smile curved his lips. His hand reached across the table, his fingers warm as they rested over hers. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice deep and steady, but threaded with something raw. I'm sorry for making you feel like I just left you. I came back for you, Isla. I'd even kept the helicopter waiting. I planned for us to leave together. But I was gone longer than I meant to, and when I came back, you were gone, and I felt... He exhaled hard. Awful. Isla shook her head, but there was a softening in her eyes. Hearing you say that, it helps. Thank you. Her gaze lingered on his hand, covering hers, the way his thumb stroked gently over her skin. It had been 2 years since she'd felt that. 2 years since a single touch could pull something deep and involuntary from her, a tightening low in her stomach she couldn't will away. Over dinner, they spoke of Mexico City, of the hotels Isla had worked in, of their fathers, of the dangerous twists life had taken since that night in the bungalow. It wasn't the evening she'd envisioned, cold, calculated, maybe even vindictive. No, here she was, laughing again, conversation flowing as easily as it had that night. The man across from her wasn't some untouchable billionaire. He was Keaton, the man who'd once made her forget the world in a single night. Later, he led her out to the terrace. Sarasota Bay glittered below them, lights shimmering across the water like scattered jewels. A soft breeze brushed her skin. They leaned against the iron railing, champagne glasses in hand, talking about the city, the view, the music floating from inside. Her head felt light, but not from the champagne. From him. Keaton stepped closer, his hand sliding to the small of her back, their eyes locked, two fixed points in a spinning world. "That night," he said softly, his gaze dipping briefly to her mouth, "you took my breath away. And right now, you're doing it again. It was a special night, Isla, one I've never forgotten." She turned her head slightly, trying to break the pull, but his fingers found her chin, gentle yet firm, guiding her face back to his. "Tonight," he murmured, his voice low enough to feel against her skin, "you've undone me, just like that night." He leaned in slowly, his lips a breath from hers, holding there, eyes locked on hers, giving her the space, giving them the space to feel the weight of it. Isla's lips parted. This was not how her mother told her the evening should go. This was not revenge. This was surrender, dangerously close, heartbreakingly familiar, and Isla was seconds away from giving in. Keaton's mouth pressed against hers, his hand sliding to her lower back and pulling her flush against him. Isla had no idea what else to do, what else she could do, except kiss him back. The kiss deepened, heat sparking and building between them until Keaton abruptly broke away. His breathing was uneven, his forehead still almost touching hers. "Isla." His voice was low, conflicted. "I wanted to find you. God, I wanted that more than anything, but I didn't expect to feel this again." His thumb grazed her waist. I wasn't ready for it. It's confusing me too." Isla blinked, a flicker of unease cutting through the haze. What does he mean? He didn't let go of her, but leaned back enough to meet her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you." Her brows knit. "What is it?" Keaton bit his lip, glanced at the ground for half a second, then looked right at her. "I'm engaged." Her mouth fell open. "What?" She stepped back instinctively, but his hand was still at her waist, holding her there. "Please, just let me explain." She didn't hear a word after engaged. Her voice was sharper now, shaking with disbelief. "Keaton, let go of me. Isla, listen." But she wrenched herself free, taking 2 quick steps back. "You're engaged? And you do this? You kiss me? You take me to dinner?" Her voice was rising, her hurt boiling into anger. "God, Keaton, I've spent the last 2 hours beating myself up, feeling guilty, thinking maybe I was wrong about you that night, thinking maybe I'd been too harsh, and now..." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You dropped this bomb at the end of the night? What kind of man does that?" He moved toward her, desperation in his eyes. "Wait, guilty? Why would you feel guilty, Isla? What? No!" She backed away, hands up like a barrier. "No more! You don't get to explain, you don't get to talk your way out of this. I don't want to see you again. Stay away from me, do you understand? Isla, please, don't walk away from me again because of a misunderstanding. Just let me..." But she was already moving fast, her heels clicking hard against the floor as she made for the exit. Her eyes stung. This disappointment cut deeper than the one 2 years ago. Her mother had been right. Men like him only looked for something to play with. And Isla? She would never be anyone's game. She burst out into the night air, her breath sharp in her chest, and climbed into the first taxi in the line. "Just go," she told the driver, her voice breaking. Behind her, Keaton shoved through the restaurant doors, just in time to see the cab pull away. He sprinted to the curb, flagging down another. "Follow that one," he ordered, sliding into the back seat without hesitation. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked on the taillights ahead. This time, he wasn't letting her disappear so easily. Isla sat in the back of the cab, swiping at the tears on her cheeks, wondering how she could still be this stupid. She should have listened to her mother. 10 minutes ago, she'd been floating, high on some ridiculous fragile happiness. And now she knew Keaton had been in love with another woman, had promised to marry her, and had still spent the entire night flirting with Isla, kissing her like it meant something. "Oh, Emma," she thought bitterly, "your father's dirty old man? A hunter. And it's best you never know him at all." The cab slowed to a stop. She tossed money at the driver, bolted for the front door, and dug frantically through her bag for the keys. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't even find them. She didn't want to ring the bell and risk waking Emma. A voice behind her froze her in place. Isla. "You can't keep running from me like this. You did it again." She spun around. Keaton was walking toward her. Her eyes widened. "You followed me?" "What the hell gives you the right?" "Yes, I did," he cut in, his voice low but firm, "because you never give me time. You run before we even get to where we need to go. I chalked it up to your age before, Isla. But not tonight. Tonight, you're not getting away." She stared at him in disbelief as he closed the distance and took hold of her arm. "The nerve, Keaton. Following me. Who do you think you are? You arrogant old player." His eyes widened. "Old player. Jesus, Isla, no one talks to me like that." "I do," she shot back, voice sharp. "Now take your damn hand off me." The door opened. Maria stood there, hair mussed from sleep, Emma in her arms, staring at them in confusion. Both Isla and Keaton turned toward her at the same time. Keaton's gaze narrowed, as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Maria's eyes flicked from Isla to him, then back again. "Oh, Mija, I didn't realize you came home with this man. I thought someone was bothering you." Then she looked down at the little girl in her arms. Emma, spotting her mother, beamed and stretched her tiny arms toward her. "Mommy! Mommy!" Keaton raked a hand through his hair, his expression shifting, confusion turning to something else. "This child," he said slowly, looking at Isla. "She just called you Mommy?" Isla exhaled shakily, her eyes glassy. This was it. The one situation she'd been desperate to avoid. Maria, realizing what she'd done, gave a tiny shrug. "Too late now, Mija. The damage is done." And before Isla could react, she stepped forward and placed Emma in Keaton's arms. "I'm going to bed," she said matter-of-factly. "You two work out your problem." Keaton found himself holding the small girl without warning, awkwardly adjusting her weight against his chest. "Isla, His voice was low, almost cautious. "What does this mean?" She bit her lip, tears sliding down her face. "Give her to me." But Keaton took 2 steps back, keeping the little girl close. He looked into her eyes. Eyes the exact same stormy grey as his own. "Oh my God!" His breath hitched. "This can't be." His gaze swung back to Isla, searching her face. "Isla," she swallowed. "Well, since you're clearly not leaving, you might as well come inside. We're putting on a show for the neighbors." Keaton walked into the living room, still holding Emma, and sank onto the couch. He barely seemed to notice Isla anymore, completely absorbed in the child. He settled her on his lap, studying her as if memorizing every feature. Isla sat across from him, her head in her hands. Of all the ways tonight could have gone wrong, this one hadn't even made the list. Finally, Keaton looked up. "Isla, what have you done? How could I have a daughter I never knew about?" She was still angry, maybe because the guilt was too heavy to carry. "How do you even know she's yours?" He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "You're not seriously going to play this game with me, are you? Look at her. Anyone can see it." He glanced back at Emma. "Those eyes, they're mine." Then it hit him. His gaze sharpened on Isla. "On the terrace? When you said you felt guilty? This is why, isn't it? You raised my daughter without ever trying to find me? Without telling me I existed in her life? If I'm some old player, Isla, what does that make you?" Her head was still in her hands. "God, this is the worst day of my life." He gave a humorless laugh. "It should be. For me, it could have been the best day I've ever had. But thanks to your stubborn pride, your ridiculous need to play martyr, you've made it one of the worst. Emma whimpered, about to cry. Isla stood and moved toward them. "Give her to me." "I'm not letting go of my daughter," Keaton said, his voice tight with anger. "She's my daughter. And right now, she wants her mother. You don't even know her name." "Emma," Keaton said softly, glancing toward a framed photo on the shelf. Emma at her first birthday, the name spelled out in bold letters beneath the picture. Isla had finally taken Emma from Keaton's arms. She rocked Emma gently in her arms, unable to stop the tears. Keaton stood, calmer now. "Isla." He reached up, touching her face gently. She pulled back, but this time he didn't let her. Instead, he pulled her and Emma into his arms. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we'll talk about what happens next. For now, we stay calm." His voice lowered, rough with emotion. "I'm angry, but I'm also unbelievably happy right now. You can't run from me, Isla. Your place is here, in my arms, just like that night." Her voice was a whisper. "And what are you going to do now?" "I'm staying here tonight," Keaton said, the edge of a smirk tugging at his mouth. "I'm going to watch my daughter sleep, and tomorrow I'll decide what to do with you." Isla felt drained, torn between heartbreak and relief. The secret was out, and Keaton, engaged Keaton, was here, with her, with their daughter. When Isla's eyes fluttered open to the pale blush of morning light, Emma was still curled in her arms, warm and soft in sleep. At the far side of the bed, Keaton, half turned toward them, stripped down to just a t-shirt and boxers, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. Isla dragged a hand over her face. "God, look at this. How could a life change so completely in a single day? And hers, well, hers had now changed twice in a single day." Her gaze drifted back to him. The ease of him there, like he belonged. Like this was something they'd done 100 times before. How the hell had he just undressed and climbed into her bed as if it were the most natural thing in the world? Moving carefully, Isla slid out from under the covers, shifting Emma closer to Keaton and tucking the blanket around her. She stepped quietly onto the floor, every movement measured, and padded toward the door on bare feet. In the kitchen, Maria was already at the counter, the rich smell of coffee filling the air. She cast her daughter a sideways, teasing look. "Morning, Mom," Isla muttered. "I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now." Maria chuckled. "You don't have to know, Mija. That man looks like he's ready to do whatever needs doing. Who knew? Turns out he's been waiting to play family man all along. Maybe after today, we'll all just live here together in perfect harmony. A big, happy family." "Mom!" Isla shot her a look, half exasperated, half embarrassed. "How do you manage to turn everything into a joke?" But she moved behind her mother anyway, wrapping her arms around her from the back. Maria turned in her embrace, brushing a hand over Isla's hair. "Listen to me, Mija. We've spent 2 years being angry at him. But he doesn't seem like such a terrible man now, does he? Just wait. Let him think he's the one handling things. But never forget—" She tapped Isla's chin with a knowing smile. "The world is in women's hands." "I know," Isla murmured, pouring herself coffee. "It's just, right now, nothing feels like it's in mine. Mom, he's engaged to someone else. He's going to marry her. And right now he's in my bed. How am I supposed to handle this?" Maria raised her brows and let out a small laugh. "You don't handle it at all, Isla. He's a grown man. Let him decide for himself." She sat across from her, lifting her cup. "Control, sweetheart, isn't always about doing everything. Sometimes it's about doing nothing. And if you can master when to do each, that's when you can run the whole damn world." Just then, Keaton stepped out of the bedroom, barefoot, wearing only a t-shirt and boxers. Emma cradled in his arms. "Morning," he said, his gaze scanning Isla as if trying to read her temperature for the day. Maria, standing at the counter, tilted her head, eyes sweeping over him in open appraisal. Nice posture, strong legs, broad shoulders. Mom! Isla's eyes went wide, mortified. What? Maria lifted a brow. Of course I'm going to check out where half my granddaughter's genes came from. Keaton's mouth curved into an amused smile as he looked at Maria. Good morning to you, Mom. Sorry about the attire. And thank you for the compliment. Not exactly how I'd hoped to meet you, but last night, well, things happened fast. Didn't they, Isla? He gently passed Emma into Isla's arms, his gaze lingering on her as though searching for some flicker of warmth. I'll get dressed, he said quietly. Then we'll talk. 30 minutes later, Maria sat on the edge of an armchair, while Isla and Keaton faced each other from opposite couches. The air was heavier now, charged. Keaton leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. Here's what I'm proposing, Isla. In the next few weeks, I'm moving you to Tampa. What? Isla's voice spiked. My job, my home, my mother. Everything is here. Shouldn't this be something we decide together? You've been making all the decisions for the last 2 years, Keaton said, not looking directly at her. This time, I'm making them. Isla turned to her mother, her eyes demanding backup, but Maria only mouthed the words, let him talk, stay calm. Your mother can come too, of course, Keaton went on. I'll get you a place there, comfortable, secure. You'll want for nothing. Isla's eyes locked on his, hot with defiance, her pulse drumming in her ears. I need you to give me some time, Keaton said, his voice even but deliberate. I told you I'm engaged. He turned to Maria, his tone softening out of respect. Ma'am, this engagement, it isn't a love story. There were specific reasons for it, and honestly, I haven't been the kind of man chasing love for quite a while now. His eyes shifted back to Isla, holding her there. I walked away from all that a long time ago. He leaned forward, elbows resting loosely on his knees. Last night, Isla wouldn't let me explain. If she had, she'd know exactly what this engagement really means. Maria's brows lifted slightly, curious, but she didn't interrupt. Stacy's a reasonable woman, Keaton continued. We get along well enough. She'll understand. Isla bit down hard on her lip, tasting the bitterness of restraint. He straightened, the weight of the next words pulling his shoulders back. My family, on the other hand, that's the part that won't be easy. I run a family company. My mother and my uncle are my partners. I'm the one steering the ship, but they... He exhaled through his nose. They're not exactly simple to deal with. His gaze found Isla's again, sharper now. If I'm going to build a future with you and our daughter Emma, I'm going to have to get them on board. And in my family, in our kind of business, freedom comes with limits, no matter how old you are. He let that sink in for a beat, then added almost dryly, even if you happen to be an... His mouth curved faintly. An aging playboy. Maria gave him a slow, knowing look. Keaton clasped his hands in front of him. I've got important meetings today. Already missed one this morning. The next 2 days are packed, but tomorrow night I head back to Tampa. I'll set things in motion so they're exactly how they need to be. He turned fully toward Maria this time, his voice firm. Your daughter matters to me. Emma is my child, and I won't allow her to grow up without me in her life. Not anymore. His eyes flicked back to Isla, steady, almost unblinking. I trust you understand that. Keaton rose to his feet, his movements deliberate, measured. I've got responsibilities I need to take care of right now, he said, his gaze briefly skimming over Isla before settling somewhere far beyond the room. Tomorrow night, before I leave, I want to talk to Isla again. Alone, if possible. He started toward the door, his broad frame casting a long shadow across the living room. Hold on a second, young man, Maria called from behind him. Isla let out a short, dry laugh. Young man? Mom? Keaton's only 8 years younger than you? That pulled his head around. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing, not entirely in anger, not entirely in amusement. The corner of his mouth twitched, but his gaze held hers, like a warning. One moment, Keaton, Maria repeated, stepping forward slightly. I like that you're a man who takes responsibility. My daughter will, of course, speak for herself. But I have just one thing to say to you. Her voice softened, but her words landed with precision. If you truly care about my daughter, you treat her as she deserves to be treated, like a goddess. She was raised with love. She still believes in love, and anyone who shatters that doesn't deserve her. I believe you know what needs to be done. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Keaton's expression shifted, just a fraction, into a short, knowing smile, a silent promise. You have my word, he said quietly. He reached for the door, but before stepping out, he turned his head one last time, his eyes locking with Isla's. It wasn't a glance. It was a moment. A tether pulled taut between them. Something unspoken passed there, part challenge, part vow, before he finally turned away and was gone. As the door clicked shut behind him, Isla stood frozen, her pulse still thrumming in her ears. She hated that his last glance lingered in her chest like a bruise she couldn't rub away. Part of her wanted to believe every word he'd said, to let herself fall back into the warmth she'd once known, but another part, older, harder, was whispering warnings. She'd survived losing him once. Could she survive it again? Keaton sat in his mother's tea room, the late afternoon light spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the amber swirl in his brandy glass. He turned it slowly, watching the liquid glint like a small fire in his hand. Across from him, Eleanor Lawrence, 65, poised, the undisputed queen of Tampa's high society, watched her son with the unblinking gaze of someone who'd weathered decades of boardroom wars and charity galas. The Lawrence name was her crown, and she guarded it like a fortress. A daughter? Her voice was cool, measured, but beneath it, razor-sharp. And her mother is... Who? Isla, Keaton said. She lives in Sarasota. Her brows lifted. Last name? Martinez. A pause, brief, but loaded. Eleanor's mouth tightened. Hispanic? From which family? Doesn't matter, he said evenly. What matters is that Emma is my daughter. Of course it matters. Eleanor rose from her chair, her heels tapping sharply across the marble floor. Every step sounded like an accusation. You are the heir to the Lawrence legacy, Keaton. Every move you make, every word you speak is scrutinized. Who her mother is matters. What does she do? He hesitated, already knowing the recoil that was coming. She works in a hotel. Guest relations. Eleanor stopped mid-stride, turning to face him. A hotel employee? The disdain was barely veiled. Keaton, what does this girl want from you? Nothing. She didn't even want me to know. Which means she's playing the long game. Today she's quiet, tomorrow the tabloids scream, billionaire CEO's secret daughter, our family name dragged through the mud. Keaton set his glass down hard enough for the crystal to ring. She's not like that. Her eyes narrowed. And you know this because... What? One night together? I know enough. Eleanor studied him for a long beat, then shifted tactics, her voice softening. Let's say she is your child. Fine. You'll do a DNA test, of course. But after that... She tilted her head. You're marrying Stacy in 3 months. What will the girl's mother say to that? Keaton crossed to the glass wall, staring out at the manicured garden beyond. I'm ending my engagement with Stacy. Her voice pitched up, sharp and incredulous. You can't be serious. The Bronsons are our most important business partners. If you end this... I will, he cut in. Turning, he met her eyes. "I'm going to marry Isla." Eleanor sat back, as if the words had physically struck her. "You're telling me you'll marry a hotel employee?" "I'm telling you, I'll marry my daughter's mother." She rose again, pacing now, the set of her shoulders hard as stone. "Keaton, think. She's manipulating you, getting pregnant without telling you, keeping it hidden, and then magically resurfacing now. It's calculated." "She thought I'd abandoned her," he shot back. "I went looking for her, not the other way around." Eleanor shook her head, almost pitying. "You've always been too trusting. Women like that, they're experts at looking innocent." But he was barely listening. In his mind, he could still see Emma's eyes, his own eyes, blinking up at him, could still feel the weight of her small hand curled around his finger. "It doesn't matter what you think, Mother. I've made my decision." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "And if you destroy this family's alliances over her?" He didn't flinch. "Then so be it." Stacy Bronson, 32, was everything Eleanor Lawrence could ever want in a daughter-in-law. Polished, Ivy League educated, a fixture at charity galas, and effortlessly beautiful with her golden hair and tailored dresses. So, when Keaton told her it was over, she didn't look shocked. They both knew there had never been love between them. Mutual benefit, compatibility, and family politics, yes. Love, no. "There's someone else," Keaton said, sitting on the edge of her cream velvet sofa, his elbows resting on his knees. "Are you in love with her?" Stacy asked, her voice calm but curious. He hesitated. Was he? What he felt for Isla was a mix of things: desire, pull, a sense of responsibility that had burrowed deep into his chest. But love? "I don't know," he admitted. "We haven't spent that much time together, but she gets under my skin, and she has a daughter, my daughter." Stacy's brows lifted slightly, but she didn't flinch. "I see. A child changes everything." She rose, walked to the coffee table, and slipped the diamond ring from her finger. The stone caught the light for one last moment before she set it in his open palm. "This might be the best decision you've ever made, Keaton. We both deserve to be happy." He closed his fingers around the ring. "What about your family?" "My father will be furious," she said with a small laugh, "but probably not as furious as your mother. I'll handle him." Her tone softened as she reached out, touching his cheek lightly. "You're a good man, Keaton. We may not have been in love, but marrying you wouldn't have been the worst thing. Still, we both deserve more than that. I'll tell my father in a way that calms him down. You go meet your daughter." Keaton covered her hand with his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Stacy. You deserve someone who's crazy about you." As he left, there was a surprising lightness in his chest. One major piece was handled, and in less than a week. But as the elevator doors closed, the real question pressed in. What would it be like once Isla and Emma arrived? He wanted Isla, yes, but he barely knew her, and Isla, with her fire, her stubborn pride, her refusal to bend for anyone, she was going to test him. Maybe, in ways he'd never been tested before. The week after Keaton's conversation with Stacy moved fast, too fast for Isla to catch her breath. Maria stood at the doorway, arms folded, her eyes softer than her words. "You're a grown woman now, Misha. This new life, you, Keaton and Emma, has to find its own balance. I'll be here the moment you call, 2 hours tops, but if I come now, I might just get in the way." Isla hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent she'd known all her life. "I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. But you'll be fine," Maria whispered, brushing back her daughter's hair. "Remember, ask for help when you need it. That's strength, not weakness." The drive from Sarasota to Tampa was quiet. Keaton kept his eyes on the road, his hand loosely on the wheel, while Isla stared out the window at the blur of palm trees and sunlight. She felt like she was being carried into a life she hadn't chosen, yet couldn't turn away from. When they arrived, the house was exactly as he'd promised, modern, bright, with a small pool that shimmered under the Florida sun. It wasn't ostentatious, but every corner felt intentional. "This is your home now," Keaton said, his voice low. Isla smiled faintly, unsure whether it was gratitude or the weight of obligation that made her chest ache. Within days, she was standing in the polished lobby of the Tampa Ritz-Carlton, head of guest relations. She should have felt proud. Instead, every congratulations from her new colleagues felt like a silent footnote. Thanks to Keaton Lawrence. They saw each other at the hotel, their conversations clipped, glances heavy with unspoken things. Until one evening, Keaton told her plainly, "We'll be married in a month." Her breath caught. "A month?" "Yes." His gaze didn't waver. "But I'll still be staying at my place for now." The words lodged in her chest. Why build a life together if he wasn't willing to live in it yet? That night, Isla sat alone by the pool. The water reflected the warm lights of her new home, a picture of calm. Yet inside, her heart was a restless tide, pulled between safety, love, and the nagging feeling that none of this was truly hers. When Keaton pulled up to get Isla and Emma, Isla was already ready. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, that cream-colored dress warming her skin tone. A soft trace of perfume drifted into the car the moment she stepped in. Keaton's eyes tracked her, sweeping over her from head to toe, then lingering on her face. This woman, she was going to be his wife. And even now, just looking at her, his pulse kicked up. The drive was quiet. Isla's expression stayed tense, and Keaton could feel it. When they reached Eleanor's estate, the massive wrought-iron gates opened without a sound. They rolled down a long drive lined with palm trees until the white stone mansion came into view. Immaculate landscaping, marble steps, double doors. Everything screamed Eleanor Lawrence. The door swung open to reveal Reynolds, sharp as ever in his grey suit. "Keaton, and your guests," he said, giving Isla a once-over with the kind of look that was polite but assessing. Inside, the living room was bright and high-ceilinged, lit by a crystal chandelier. Eleanor stood by the window, swirling wine in a crystal glass. Black silk dress, pearls at her neck. She was every inch the queen of her domain. "Welcome," she said with a cool smile. "May I see Emma?" Isla held her daughter a little tighter. "Of course." She handed Emma over. Eleanor studied the baby's face closely. "Lawrence eyes," she said, a small nod. "No question." Once they were seated, Eleanor got straight to the point. "If this child is truly part of our family, there are things we need to make clear. First, Emma cannot be taken from us. No matter what happens, she stays in this family." Isla's fingers tightened together. "Are you saying you take her away from me?" "No," Eleanor said, voice still cool, "but to avoid future complications, a prenuptial agreement is necessary. Families like ours always do this." Reynolds spoke up. "It's for your protection as well as Emma's. If you divorce, you can't remove her from the family. And there are financial clauses. This is how we protect ourselves from opportunists." Isla's eyes hardened. "Before Keaton showed up, we had a happy life, Mrs. Lawrence. I'm not desperate to get married, and I'm not going to let anyone strong-arm me. This is your granddaughter. If you truly see her as family, then the easiest way to make that real is to love her, bond with her, and keep a good relationship with me. But if you try anything else, I won't go along with it." "Isla, take it easy," Keaton said quietly, though his gaze lingered on her fire, drawn to it in spite of himself. Eleanor's expression didn't shift. "You will marry my son. This marriage will stay out of the press for as long as possible. You won't damage our reputation, and you will sign the prenup. The rest, Keaton will decide." "Mother," Keaton said sharply, "Isla is not an opportunist. I want you to try being a little more reasonable." Eleanor only gave a slight nod, ending the discussion. They didn't stay longer than 30 minutes. The car ride back was silent. Emma dozing in the back seat, while Isla stared out the window. Keaton's hands stayed tight on the wheel, his jaw set. By the time they pulled into the driveway, neither of them was ready to talk. But they both knew they would. Keaton carried Emma in one arm as he unlocked the front door, holding it open for Isla. He didn't step too close, gave her space. Her silence was sharp enough to read. Pushing her now would only make it worse. Inside, he set Emma down on the living room rug. The little girl immediately toddled toward a pile of toys, giggling when Keaton knelt beside her. He stacked blocks, made exaggerated faces, let her win every game. Emma's laughter filled the room, light and unrestrained. From the couch, Isla watched them. The way Keaton scooped his daughter up, the warmth in his eyes, the patience in his hands. He looked like a man who'd been born to be a father. Her chest tightened, and she blinked fast, brushing away a tear before it could slide down her cheek. How had her life turned so completely upside down? One night, one single night, with a man she barely knew, and here she was. Later, when Emma finally drifted off in her crib, Keaton stepped out onto the pool deck and found Isla sitting alone, her gaze fixed on the water's ripples. He walked over slowly. "I told you my family could be difficult," he said, voice low. "But it's nothing we can't get past, not if we take it one step at a time." He rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. She leaned away just enough for him to notice. His hand dropped, and though his face stayed calm, his posture shifted, shoulders pulling back, a faint exhale through his nose. He'd read her mood. He wasn't going to push. "1 week from now," he said after a moment, "we'll have the ceremony here at the house, just family. After that, we move at your pace, however you want." Isla didn't look at him, just nodded once, her eyes still on the water. Keaton stood there for another heartbeat, then turned and walked inside. Moments later, she heard the front door shut behind him. 1 week later, the Lawrence estate woke to an ordinary morning. No flowers, no music, no sense of celebration. It was their wedding day. Isla wore a simple knee-length white dress. Emma's laughter could be heard faintly from down the hall, her new nanny chasing after her. Eleanor and Reynolds were dressed immaculately, every detail perfect, as if the formality of their attire could make up for the absence of warmth. Keaton looked sharp in a tailored navy suit. Maria wasn't there. She'd told Keaton, "I don't see this as a wedding, it's a contract, and when my daughter's not happy enough to smile, I'm not showing up for a contract signing. The day you give her a real wedding, I'll be there in the front row." In the formal sitting room, Isla sat at a long mahogany table, a stack of legal papers spread out before her. The prenuptial agreement, pages and pages of it. Her eyes were glassy, drifting between the fine print and Keaton's face. He stood beside her, steady, sending her a silent, "I've got you," with just a look. She picked up the pen. A pause. Then her signature flowed across the page. Minutes later, the officiant arrived. The words were brief, the exchange stripped to its essentials. She lifted the pen, paused, and signed her name. "I do," she said. "I do," he replied. And just like that, it was over. As they stepped aside, Eleanor leaned in close to Isla, her perfume sharp and cold. "Now, you carry the Lawrence name," she murmured, "but don't ever mistake that for being a Lawrence." Across the room, Emma was toddling around, squealing with delight. Eleanor bent down to scoop her up, Reynolds following with an indulgent smile. For the first time that day, something eased in Isla's chest. Emma's laughter softened the edges of everything, but Keaton's gaze never left her. He saw the way her hand held the champagne flute without lifting it to her lips, how she set it back on the table untouched. The entire exchange, clinical, rehearsed, sat heavy on him. This wasn't how he'd wanted it. Not for her, not for them. When they got home, Isla didn't get out of the car right away. She sat there, hands resting in her lap, eyes fixed on some point far beyond the windshield. "I need some time alone," she said finally, her voice calm but carrying the weight of something heavier. "This marriage, it's not a love story, Keaton. You married me for Emma, and I agreed for Emma." Keaton's jaw tightened, the muscle ticking. "Is that what you think?" he asked quietly. "You might be right, I don't know you well. And yes, this marriage was a practical solution. Under the circumstances, we've tried to do the best we can." Her eyes glossed over and she blinked quickly. "That's why I need a little space." He leaned back, searching her face, but not pushing. "Like I told you, this will go the way you want it to." 3 months passed. Keaton spent nights at his own estate. Isla and Emma stayed in the house he'd found for them. Their marriage existed in a strange, polite orbit, close enough to acknowledge, too far to touch. Isla had settled into her job at the Ritz-Carlton. Emma was cared for by the nanny during the day. Keaton came by almost every evening to see his daughter, but between him and Isla, the space seemed only to widen. Then, one night, he walked in and stopped in the doorway. Isla stood by the mirror in a deep green dress that hugged her just right, hair in soft waves, lips painted a shade that pulled every bit of attention toward her. For a moment, Keaton hoped it was for him. But when she turned slipping earrings into place, she said, "It's one of the girls at work. Birthday party." His eyes narrowed. "Husbands aren't invited." She met his gaze, her tone even. "Ours isn't that kind of marriage, remember. No society pages, no media attention, no overlap." Before he could answer, she picked up her clutch and walked past him, leaving the faint trace of her perfume and the sharp sting of something else in her wake. Keaton stood there, watching the door close behind her. And for the first time in weeks, the distance between them didn't feel polite. It felt personal. Later that night, when Isla came home and opened the door, she froze. Keaton was standing in the living room, hands in his pockets, like he'd been there a while. "I thought you'd gone home," she said, setting her bag down. "This is my home too," he replied evenly. "Really?" Her brows arched. "That's funny. You've never actually slept here. Do you want me to stay tonight?" She let out a small, incredulous laugh. "So you'll stay if I ask? That's how this works, Keaton." The air between them thickened, heavy with all the things they hadn't said for weeks. "How long is this arrangement supposed to last, Keaton?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Until you fall in love with someone else. Or I do. You didn't need to marry me to be close to Emma. So, why are you doing this to both of us?" His jaw tightened. "Is there someone else, Isla? Is that what this is? You want to be with another man?" "That's not the point," her eyes flashed. "The point is our lives and how because of your decision neither of us is free." He stepped closer and caught her arm, not rough but firm. "What do you want me to do, Isla? You're the one who asked for space. You keep me at arm's length, and I've been trying to keep the balance. Do you hate me? I thought there was something between us. Now I'm not sure I know you at all." "You idiot," her mind whispered. "I can't feel loved. I can't feel any kind of real romance between us. The fact that you married me only because of Emma. Do you not understand how much that hurts? My pride." "You're not the man from that night," she said aloud. "You and your family. You're strangers to me. I feel like I've been locked in a golden cage where I'm not even wanted, and I'm terrified Emma's going to grow up under those Lawrence rules your mother worships. His eyes narrowed, his voice taut with control. I can't change my family, but every step I've taken since I found you, since I found Emma, has been about protecting you both. I won't let anyone hurt you, Isla. But you could meet me halfway, just once. I've been patient for 3 months now, and look at us. We're having our first fight, before we've even felt married. He let go of her arm, exhaled sharply and grabbed his keys. Without another word, he walked out, the door shutting hard behind him. Keaton hadn't been by in days, but the space had only sharpened the edges of his thoughts. Isla was everywhere, in the curve of a stranger's hair, in the sound of heels against a sidewalk, in the brush of perfume in a crowded room. She was haunting him. By Saturday night, after a long dinner with friends and a few glasses too many, he couldn't keep away any longer. A bottle of whiskey in hand, he found himself at her door. She opened it, steam still clinging to her damp hair, the soft white robe knotted loosely at her waist. For a moment, she froze. Keaton was nearby, he said, his voice low, a little rough. Thought I'd see you, and Emma. Her gaze dipped to the bottle. You came here half drunk to see your daughter? I'm not drunk, he countered, stepping inside before she could push back. Don't make it a thing. I should get dressed, she said, starting to turn. But his fingers closed gently around her arm, firm enough to stop her, soft enough to keep it from feeling like a demand. Don't. Just sit with me for a while. They moved to the couch, the air between them thick with the kind of silence that carries 1,000 unspoken things. He poured 2 glasses, slid one toward her. It's Sunday tomorrow, no rush, let's just talk, like that night. The words drew a flicker in her eyes, a memory, uninvited but vivid. He noticed the faint scar along her knee where her robe parted. Slowly, without asking, he let his fingertips trace it, feather-light. She stilled, a sharp breath catching in her throat. The bungalow, he murmured. I watched you through the glass that night, in the shower. Her lips curved, just a fraction. I knew you were looking. His gaze didn't waver. That night was extraordinary. We were in danger. We needed each other. You were so damn beautiful, Isla. But it wasn't just that. You let me in. You didn't know me, and you still took care of me. You patched me up. Then, somehow, you were in my arms. I couldn't have walked away, even if I wanted to. When I came back the next morning and you were gone, his voice thinned for a moment. It felt like something had been ripped out of me. I don't know how it would have gone if you'd stayed, but I know I wanted to protect you, to be near you. His hand slid down, covering hers, his thumb brushing the ridge of her knuckles. Now I see a woman who is strong, devoted, a mother who would move mountains for her child, and more beautiful than the girl in that bungalow. And all I want is for this marriage to be real, with everything I have. But you keep that wall up. Her lashes lowered, her voice soft but edged. Because you never gave us a chance to start fresh. You were engaged, Keaton. You came in with your money, your influence, fixing everything like it was a problem to solve. You didn't win my heart. Whatever might have been didn't happen. I never felt loved. I never felt wanted, just necessary. And now it feels like you've caged me here. His jaw tightened. And what about my cage? Everywhere I go, I see you. Every dark-haired woman, I think it's you. When I do see you, I can barely breathe, and I can't even touch you. You're my wife now, Isla. And yet you're further away from me than you were that first night. He leaned in. This time, she didn't pull away, but her lips stayed still under his. He deepened it, not demanding but coaxing, his hand brushing the line of her jaw, tilting her just enough for the kiss to sink in. Her breath warmed against his cheek, her fingers curling almost involuntarily in the fabric of his shirt. The first time you were mine, he whispered against her lips. You were pure, untouched, and I told myself my only job was to protect you. But somewhere along the way, I missed that it was love. And now, his forehead rested lightly against hers. Now, I can't think about anything but you. The kiss started hesitant. Isla's lips held a cool distance, but Keaton's patient touch, his thumb brushing her cheek, the warmth trailing down to her neck, slowly began to melt it away. Without thinking, she slid her hand to the back of his neck. The kiss deepened, their breaths tangling in the quiet room. He pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. Her robe loosened, slipping off one shoulder, and her bare skin under his fingers felt both familiar and startlingly new. Guiding her gently onto the couch, his mouth traveled along the curve of her neck. Her breathing quickened, her fingers threading into his hair. The robe fell silently to the floor. His hands moved with intent, exploring her slowly, deliberately. Isla's eyes closed. This time she didn't pull away. They had been tangled together for hours, the night blurring into something both urgent and tender. Every touch felt like rediscovery, every kiss like it was making up for lost time. When morning came, soft light spilled across the room. Keaton stirred first, his arm still draped protectively over Isla's waist. For a moment, he just looked at her, hair mussed, skin warm from sleep, and wondered how it had taken them this long to get here. Isla's eyes fluttered open, meeting his in a sleepy, unguarded smile. Before either could say a word, the bedroom door creaked. Emma toddled in, her little feet padding against the floor. She climbed up onto the bed with determination only a 14-month-old could have, wedging herself between them. Isla laughed softly, pulling her daughter close, while Keaton wrapped an arm around them both. For the first time, it felt like they weren't just surviving an arrangement. They were starting to live as a family. But the illusion shattered before noon. Isla's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it lazily, then froze. Her breath caught as she read the headlines splashed across a gossip site. Tampa's most eligible bachelor, Keaton Lawrence, dumped by fiancé after impregnating hotel worker. Gold digger bride, sources say they're already married. Her chest tightened. The article was worse than the headline. Her name wasn't there, but the descriptions left no doubt. They had painted her as a cliché, the opportunist, the scandal. She dropped the phone onto the bed as if it burned her. Keaton picked it up, scanning the words, his jaw locking. "I'm going to find out who did this," he said, voice low but sharp. "Maybe you don't have to," Isla replied, her tone cooler than she meant. "We both know who benefits from this." His gaze flicked to hers. "My mother wouldn't—" He stopped, realizing even he didn't fully believe it. Isla turned away, hugging her knees to her chest. "It doesn't matter who. What matters is everyone will think it's true." Keaton moved closer, his voice softening. "No. What matters is the truth. I will fix this, Isla. I promise you." She looked at him, searching his face for the man from last night, the man who made her feel wanted, not trapped. For a flicker of a second she saw him, but the weight of the morning pressed between them, and the distance they thought they'd closed began to grow again. That evening, Keaton arrived at his mother's estate with Isla by his side. The drive had been quiet. Tension coiled between them like a live wire. Isla's hands rested in her lap, fingers laced, her gaze fixed out the window as the sprawling Lawrence property came into view. The front doors swung open before they even reached them. Eleanor stood framed in the marble foyer, immaculate as always, with Reynolds a few steps behind, his expression unreadable. In the sitting room, a third figure waited, Stacy. She rose from the sofa, smoothing her dress, but her eyes were sharp. Keaton didn't bother with pleasantries. "Which one of you did it?" His voice was low, but carried an edge that made the air in the room tighten. "Who leaked that story?" Eleanor's lips curved into a polite, icy smile. "Keaton, this isn't—" "Don't," He cut her off. His gaze slid to Reynolds. You? Reynolds took a slow sip of scotch. Image management sometimes requires... Image management! Keaton's voice sharpened. You humiliate my wife and drag her name through the mud for image management? Then his eyes locked on Stacy. Was it you? Her brows shot up. Me? No, Keaton. That's exactly why I came here tonight. To tell you to your face, I'm not the one who leaked it. Ask your mother and uncle, because they dragged me into this mess too. Eleanor's chin lifted. That's ridiculous. No, Stacy cut in, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, like she'd been holding this in for years. You two never once asked what we wanted. Not once. You wanted an alliance, a business deal. I care about Keaton. He's a good man, but I was never in love with him, and he wasn't in love with me. You pushed us together anyway, and now you're hurting him. You're hurting me, and you're hurting her. She turned her gaze to Isla, her tone softening. I'm on his side. At least one of us chose the life we actually wanted, and I won't stand by while you try to tear it apart. The room went still. Eleanor's eyes flicked toward Isla, assessing her like she was some kind of liability to be managed. The media will spin whatever it wants. That's why we have to control the narrative. No, Keaton said, his voice firm. We're done with your narratives. Isla hadn't spoken yet, but her eyes met Stacy's. And for the first time, there was something in them that wasn't guarded, just the faintest flicker of relief. A silent acknowledgement. Eleanor drew a breath to argue again, but Keaton stepped closer to Isla, placing a hand at the small of her back in a quiet, possessive gesture. This conversation's over, he said. They turned for the door. As they walked out, Isla glanced sideways at him, still wary, still uncertain, but there was the beginning of something else too. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the first fragile sense that, for the moment, they were on the same side. The Tampa Business and Philanthropy Gala glittered under chandeliers the size of small cars. Keaton walked in with Isla on his arm, their fingers laced together like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was breathtaking, midnight blue silk, skimming her figure, her hair swept up to show off the line of her neck. Conversations paused as they crossed the room. Stacy spotted them first, her smile genuine. She pulled them both into a quick embrace before the flash of cameras closed in. This woman, Stacy said to the press, one hand on Isla's arm, is extraordinary. Our engagement, that was something our families arranged. I've always cared for Keaton, but only as a dear friend. Isla was in his life before me, and Isla, Keaton, and their daughter Emma, she glanced warmly between them, are a real family. The microphones turned toward Keaton. How did you two meet? He didn't hesitate. In a storm. She nearly saved my life that night, and then she disappeared, and I spent 2 years trying to find her. We have a love story worth telling. His eyes cut to hers, steady. And in a month, we're going to have a wedding to match it. There was a murmur from the reporters, a flurry of flashes. Then, unexpectedly, Isla stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but rang clear. I know there's been speculation about who I am, about why we're together, so let me make it simple. Keaton is my partner in every sense, and Emma is our greatest joy. This isn't about money or scandal, it's about choosing each other, and I couldn't be prouder of that choice. Eleanor, caught in the press swarm, forced a smile and stepped up beside Isla, looping an arm around her waist for the cameras. As the shutters clicked, Isla's smile didn't waver, but she leaned in just enough for only Eleanor to hear. Don't worry, she murmured, velvet over steel. I know exactly who I am now. For the first time, Eleanor had no quick reply. Keaton glanced at Isla, pride flickering in his eyes. It wasn't just a united front anymore. Tonight, they were a team. 1 month later, their wedding was set on the very island where it had all begun. The island bloomed with white tents, golden lights, strung like fallen stars between palm trees, and the hum of 100 voices drifting in the salt-heavy breeze. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a declaration. Maria stood beside her daughter at every turn, her smile warm, but her eyes misting when no one was watching. Emma, in a soft tulle dress, moved between her parents' arms all evening, sometimes giggling in Keaton's embrace, other times pressing her cheek against Isla's shoulder as if the world outside didn't exist. The ceremony had been held on the sand, the same stretch of shore where a storm once changed everything. Guests still whispered about the choice of venue. The bungalow sat in the distance like a quiet witness, and everyone knew the bride and groom planned to spend their wedding night there. A story had begun in those walls. Now it would begin again. Eleanor's smile had been strained from the start, but another wrinkle formed between her brows when she noticed Reynolds trailing Maria like a shadow. He poured her champagne, offered her his arm, and laughed at things she didn't even seem to find funny. Maria, for her part, appeared to enjoy it in her own teasing way. At one point, she caught Eleanor watching them and glided over, the candlelight catching the sparkle in her eyes. "Sweetheart," Maria said smoothly, "you're a beautiful woman, but you're ice cold. You're missing fire." Her voice dipped into a velvet challenge. "If you like, I could teach you a thing or two about the power of women." Eleanor froze, just for a heartbeat, long enough for Maria's smile to turn into a quiet victory before she moved away with Reynolds in tow. Later, as the night deepened and the dancing slowed, Keaton and Isla slipped away from the crowd. The music, the laughter, the clinking glass faded behind them. Hand in hand, they walked toward the bungalow, the sand cool under their bare feet. The place smelled faintly of salt and old wood, exactly as it had the night they first met. Inside, Keaton closed the door, shutting out the world. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. No reporters, no contracts, no family agendas, just the man who hadn't been able to get her out of his mind for 2 years. And the woman who had finally decided to stay. Isla smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "Feels like the beginning," she whispered. Keaton cupped her face, his forehead resting against hers. "That's because it is, my love." And somewhere outside, the ocean kept moving, steady, certain, like it had always known. They'd find their way back here. Thank you for staying till the end. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and if this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me.